Are you someone who loves to go thrifting and find reusable fabrics to keep out of the landfill? Well, stick around. I'm going to show you how to make this very easy quilt and use materials that would otherwise be thrown away. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take our flannel shirts that we have collected, and we need to now cut them apart so that we have the usable fabric we need for this quilt. So I start with a sleeve at the shoulder, and then now I will cut right up the seam. I cut the seam out, and then I cut the cuff off. We're going to put that aside because later we're going to take the buttons off of that cuff and keep them, and we might be able to use some of the pieces from the cuff for other projects. And the second sleeve exactly the same way. Now, one thing that I like to get my shirts from the Goodwill outlet. We have one in our town, and not everybody has one, so if you don't, a garage sale is a really good place to find flannel shirts. Ask your friends also if they have shirts that they want to get rid of. I wouldn't go to Goodwill because the price of the shirts at Goodwill is probably a little more than I want to spend for this yardage. But I would go to other traditional thrift stores that have lower prices on flannel shirts. Next, I'm going to go right up the seam of the front side, and I'm going to cut that off, and I'm also going to cut off the placket that has the buttons on it right down the front. Again, I will be setting this aside, and later I'll be taking the buttons off of those to save. And so now we have another piece. Now I go to the same thing with the other front piece of your shirt. Right now I'm looking at the back. There's a placket here at the top. I'm going to cut that off. It's 2 layers, so later I will probably cut that apart and again use for small scraps for other projects. And there definitely will be other projects that I'll be using these flannels for. And again, here's that other piece of the placket. Take that off. And there is a pocket. Right now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take that pocket, the whole piece, and leave the pocket intact and keep that aside because there are some projects that I may use the pockets for. So now that I have all my pieces, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them out. I'm going to see how much fabric am I getting out of just a regular, probably it's about a man's large size shirt. Now, of course, the larger the shirt, the more fabric you're going to get. My board is 36 inches across, so as I start laying these out, we're going to see how much fabric we have. And so what I end up with is I end up with a little more than half a yard. This particular shirt I paid about $1 for, and so $1 for half a yard of usable fabric is a really good deal. And as I said, my favorite part is that I'm able to use these, put them into something that's really pretty, usable, and keeping this fabric and buttons out of the landfills. So making the quilt itself is very simple. Once you have your shirts cut apart, and you will have a stack of fabrics like this, and you'll have many more colors. I used many shirts for this one. And you have all of your 5-inch squares cut. You're going to start with a stack. Here's what the 5-inch square is going to look like. You're going to take 4 of them, and you're going to simply sew 2 together, 2 together, and then you're going to sew them together into a 4-patch block. It's super simple, a 4-patch block. So then once you have a stack of 4-patch blocks, You now are simply going to start sewing them together in rows, is how I did this one. So I sewed a row of 4 patches and then the next row. So I had 7 rows, and this is a king size. So I had 7 rows of the 4 patches to sew together. So you can see I started putting them together right there, and then the next one, and the next one, just like that. So that really is all there is to this quilt. It's very simple, but what makes it fabulous is because we have all these different colors. Now this quilt is for a wedding present. It is a king size, which is huge, wonderfully warm quilt. And this is completely part of the sustainable sewing. I'm really starting to get into that idea. I really like it. I hope to do some more. But this is completely things that would have gone to the landfill. And you can see this is a lot of shirts that would have gone to the landfill. So now there's also, I used flannel on the outside sachet, and I used flannel for the back. And I used just a simple batting in the middle. And it made it, it's not too poofy. I used a nice, like Warm and Natural, a very flat batting, so that it's not too heavy. So you're going to have leftovers because not everything in a shirt will be 5-inch squares. So keep the leftovers. We're going to be doing a couple more things. But for this particular quilt, my daughter, they have a dog who is their child. So this is what I made with my scraps. And so now we're going to take a look at the blocks themselves. Well, they're going to look at the big stitch quilting. So this is just using embroidery floss. I think for this one I used a pearl cotton, which is about a number 8. You don't want it too big. Or you can use 3 strands of embroidery floss. It will look exactly the same. And I did not have to mark this quilt. All I had to do was start quilting from one corner, and I would stitch from corner to corner to corner to corner. And then the next line I would do, starting at the edge, up the next row until I had all of these blocks had diagonal lines. Then I started again up in this corner, and I started from corner to corner. So this way you don't have to mark anything. You don't need pens. You don't need markers. You don't have to worry about lines that aren't going to come out. You don't have to worry about lines that aren't straight, because they're going to be straight if you go corner to corner. And again, big stitch, the idea of big stitch is that it doesn't have to be perfectly spaced stitches. In fact, it's more interesting if you've got some variation in your stitch lengths. So it really is something you just don't worry about. You just relax and you sew. And then for the border, I simply used 2 running stitches up that side to hold that border together, just enough. And you can see my plaid is my flannel on the outer edge is a nice plaid, and that's exactly what I used for the back as well. You can see that here. And if you're liking this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. And so here you see, again, I sewed these in, these are 2-inch blocks that once sewed down are about 1.5 inches. And I sewed them in groups of 4, 4, 4, 4. Now I will tell you, when you're working this small with this many of the squares, that sometimes there's a little bit of stretch to it. I didn't worry too much about that. I didn't worry too much about the directions of my plaids because this is for a dog. But I also did the same stitching here where I went from corner to corner and corner to corner. And that was plenty of stitching. And then on the edge of this one, I did stitches that go straight out. I really like how that, here's what it looks up close. And here's the nice texture it gives it. Isn't that nice? Now, because this particular quilt is flannel, that means that it does pick up lint as you go along. So what I needed to do is I need to lay it out flat and I need to take just my roller, my tape roller brush, and take off the lint. And so I start with the small quilt first. Now it's time to take off the quilt from the frame for the large quilt, and I'm going to do the same thing to this one. This quilt would not be complete without a label, so I have chosen some of my printed fabric that is several labels, and I've chosen which one I want to put on the back of this quilt. After writing the label, I've pressed the edges under, and now it's just a matter of whip stitching this in place on the back of the quilt. And the quilt is done, and now it's just a matter of rolling it up and getting it into the gift bag so that it'll be ready to give to the bridal couple.